Hey guys, in this video, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to demonstrate the FusionPay dashboard, how to get the most value out of interacting with the dashboard, and simply explain a couple of the components that we find inside of that dashboard. Let's first look at accessing the FusionPay dashboard. That action begins in the accounting section of the Service Fusion banner. When you hover your mouse icon over the accounting section, you'll notice in the bottom right corner, we have access to navigate to that FusionPay dashboard. When we select the FusionPay dashboard, we're brought to this screen. You'll immediately notice there's three main components that comprise the FusionPay dashboard. First, we're presented with the dashboard itself. We also have access to a payments section. And lastly, we see the presence of a deposit section. The dashboard in the FusionPay dashboard shows us at a glance some interesting metrics that folks that process payments are interested in reviewing. Notice that each widget represents one metric, along with each widget having a time selection option in the top right corner. The time selection options that we offer are today, yesterday, this week, this month, last week, and last month. You can quickly and individually change the time selection to the desired time that you might be interested in seeing the reported information for each individual widget. You can also change all widgets on the dashboard very quickly in the top right corner as well. When we utilize the time selection in the top right corner, we'll see that every widget then starts to report based on the time selection chosen in that top right corner. Next, we'll move on to the payments section. When we see the payments section inside of the FusionPay dashboard, whether these payments have been batched or we've even received the funding in the form of a received deposit for these, we'll see every payment that gets processed, either approved or declined, show up on this payment section of the FusionPay dashboard. You'll notice that very similar to the main dashboard, we also have a selection. By default, this will default to this month. You can also filter based on a couple of interesting metrics that are represented through different columns in this payment section as well. We could look at a specific payment method, whether we're interested in viewing credit cards or perhaps just the ACH payments that we might be receiving. We can also isolate just approved payments or declined payments or see all payments. And then for our type, we'll have an option of either sale, refund, or void. So certainly helpful during a reconciliation process to be able to isolate and filter very easily. But almost most important on this screen is the ability to navigate directly to the invoice that this payment was attributed to. This could be an invoice. This could also be a job if the form of payment was a job deposit. If we were to refer back to our accounting section, under the payments column, we see three different options. Of course, the ability to receive a payment, but we also are exposed to the idea that there's two different types of payments inside of Service Fusion. We have invoice payments and we have job deposits. Regardless of the type of payment, we have the ability to navigate very quickly and easily directly to either the job if it were a job deposit type payment or the invoice if it were an invoice payment type payment from the FusionPay dashboard. You'll notice the example that we see on the screen now. We have one payment that's been received so far this month. The type was a sale. The date was March 9th. We see a transaction ID, which would certainly be helpful to extend over to the support team. If this were not a sandbox account, but a real system, we would also see a real authorization number show up in the very next column. Notice you'll also see the payment method. Here we have the card type along with a tokenized version of the card, with the exception of the last 4 digits of the card number. In the next column, we see the ability to travel directly to the job or the invoice to which this payment was originated, along with simply knowing that job number or that invoice number. We also see the amount of the payment, we see that approved status, and we also have the ability to see additional information by selecting on the view. When we select the view link, we can see even more information associated with this payment. We can see the customer to which this payment was attributed. We can also travel directly to the customer record. We could choose to open that up in a new tab, and we can see the customer's name is All-Star LED Lighting, and we can quickly travel to All-Star LED Lighting's customer profile in Service Fusion. And since we're operating in a browser, we can very quickly and easily return back to the payment in question. Of course, we can see some of the same information that's summarized kind of in that background or that payment section of the FusionPay dashboard. But we can see a few more pieces of information. We're now exposed to the billing information associated with this payment, seeing the address, the zip postal code, along with a payment memo if one were captured at the time of the payment. And of course, we can also see the amount summarized in this section. We can see again that same tabular view, except this time we can now see invoice level information as well. So we can see the date of the invoice, so we can quickly compare that invoice date along with the payment date. Of course, we can see the invoice number to which this payment was applied, along with the ability to travel to that invoice number. And the same idea, I can open that up in a new tab, and knowing that's invoice number 1047, I can quickly travel to my invoice 1047. And again, because I'm operating in a browser, I can exploit my browser controls and very quickly and easily navigate back to that main payment screen. Now, it's interesting to note that when I select to travel directly to the invoice, that is the invoice as opposed to the payment itself. From the invoice, I can very quickly travel to the payment. If I select the payment amount here, I can see the payment or payments that comprise the total reported amount against this invoice, and I can travel specifically to the payment in question outside of the FusionPay dashboard, but native to the Service Fusion application, simply by selecting that payment date. This is a view of the payment as consumed through the Service Fusion platform, as opposed to specifically the FusionPay dashboard. We see a little bit more information here. Most notably, we see a date and a timestamp and the attribution to whom processed that payment. And again, I can quickly and easily navigate back to my main FusionPay dashboard. Again, I have the view option expanded to get some additional detail about my $200 payment that was processed back on the 9th. And what's interesting to note from this tabular view, if this was associated specifically with a job, so this was a job deposit as opposed to an invoice payment, instead of seeing a value in the invoice number column, instead I can see a job number in the for jobs column. I can also then see the amount due on this invoice. So we know from our research by viewing the invoice and the associated invoice payment that the amount due is 0, that the applied amount of that invoice payment was $200, which matches the amount of the payment. And we can use that information to corroborate the information that's summarized below in our expanded view. We also then see a balance that might be associated with that invoice. And of course, with a 0 amount due, we have a 0 balance associated with this invoice. We can also choose to navigate directly to the invoice payment from the Service Fusion platform. So again, if I wanted to see that payment, instead of navigating through the invoice, so to speak, instead I can simply click the green button in order to view that invoice payment. And you'll notice that this screen is the same screen that we saw before, as we're consuming this information directly through the native Service Fusion platform. Navigating back to our FusionPay dashboard, you can quickly and easily close this view for the expanded view and return back to the tabular view in our payment screen. And we can also then quickly and easily navigate to the deposit section. When we navigate to the deposit section, this view will look very similar to our payment screen in the sense that we're initially presented with a tabular view summarizing the different deposits that we have. In this example, we have one deposit received on March 10th. We certainly have the potential to have multiple batch dates representing multiple deposit entries in this table. Because each batch has the potential to include more than one transaction, each batch row will initially be collapsed. You'll choose to uncollapse this to see the detail of the different payments that are included in this batch. We'll also see the number of transactions associated with this batch before we uncollapse the view, along with the batch total. We do see when we uncollapse this view for our entire deposit, the individual payments that comprise this deposit. In this example, we see one payment, and we see that summarized with one transaction. We see an authorization ID for this payment. We also see the date and the time that the payment was run. We also see the payment method, and then we also see the total. This one might look familiar because, yes, indeed, this is the deposit received as a result of processing the payment that we viewed back over on that payment section. Remember, we had that Discover card. The last 4 digits were 9424 in the amount of $200 processed on March 9th. So this payment was processed on the 9th. We could see that on the payment screen. It was processed at 4 p.m. That precedes our batch time. So it batched out overnight, and then goodness, we even received, in this example, funding next day. We processed this payment on March 9th at 4 p.m., and then we received the deposit, as we can see in the deposit section for this payment, the very next day on March 10th. Very similar to our previous sections, we also have a time selection tool in the top right corner if I wanted to instead see deposits from either a custom date range here, or also we have our predefined time selection options like last month, last week, this month, this week, or to even isolate it further just today and yesterday. I hope this video helped explain a little bit of the information that we see in the FusionPay dashboard. Certainly don't hesitate to reach out to support@servicefusion.com or Slack your support team members if you have any questions at all. Thanks so much, guys, and take care.